you do?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I am Alex Snyder. I'm one of the co-owners of Queen Books, and we're so pleased to be co-hosting the launch for the Troupers with Cormorant Books. The evening setup is going to be about 30 minutes, conversation between Terry and Richard, which will be followed by questions, which can be submitted through the Q&A box in the Zoom call. And I just also wanted to make sure that everyone knew that Richard is also going to be joining us at Queen Books on Saturday, October 23rd from 2 to 3:30 p.m. For an outdoor signing. So please, if you could make it, I know that Richard would be very happy to meet everyone. And if you aren't able to make it, we will have signed copies as well. And those can be purchased either just in the store, through our website, or you could call or email and we'll set one aside for you. I'd also like to acknowledge the sacred land on which Cormorant Books operates. It's been a site of human activity for many thousands of years, more than 15,000. This land is a territory of the Huron-Wendat and Petun First Nations, the Seneca, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit River. This territory was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and the Confederacy of the Ojibwe and allied nations to peaceably share and steward the resources around the Great Lakes. Today, the meeting place of Toronto remains home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community on this territory. We're also mindful of broken covenants and the need to strive and make right with all our relations. And I'm going to throw it over to Marc Côté. Marc has been the publisher of Cormorant Books for 20 years. Along the way, he has had the unmitigated pleasure of working with authors and poets from across Canada. Prior to Cormorant, he worked as a bookstore clerk, book reviewer, and director of the Literary Press Group from 1990 to 1995. For brief periods, he worked in the literature office of the Ontario Arts Council, was the marketing manager of Stoddart Publishing, and as a senior officer responsible for all the awards and prizes at the Canadian Council for the Arts, where he coordinated in the marketing and all events for the 1996 Governor General's Literary Awards. In the last 2 decades, Cormorant Books has been nominated for Small Press Publisher of the Year 8 times by the Canadian Booksellers Association. For the Canadian Booksellers Association. It won that award 3 times. Marc has won the Libris for Editor of the Year twice. Welcome, Marc.
Thank you, Alex. And this is the time when, if we were in that beautiful bookstore on Queen Street, Queen Books, I could point to the beautifully filled shelves with wonderful, wonderful books and talk about what a wonderful bookstore it is. So you're all going to have to take my word for it, but some of you have been there before. And those of you listening now who haven't, please go into the store. It really is exactly what a bookstore is meant to be. And it's run by people who care about books and authors. And it's a great part of the Leslieville community. And, you know, I can't say enough good about it. Now, I'm going to talk briefly about the Troupers, which Cormorant Books is very pleased to publish. It is, I believe, our 2nd time publishing Richard Scarsbrook. And earlier when I was talking, I said publishers at this point in a book launch always have to say words like wonderful or elegiac. We don't ever get to say words like funny and fun and enjoyable, delightful. But I can say that about the Troupers because it is all of those things. It's one of those books you read and you really enjoy it. You're not reading it because it's good for you. You're just reading it because it's good. And it's a wonderful book. We're delighted to be publishing it. And I'm going to say it's a surefire nominee for the Stephen Leacock Medal for Humor. Of course, nothing is ever surefire in this world. So yes, as Richard did, cross our fingers. And speaking of the Leacock Medal for Humor, I can now go to introducing our wonderful interviewer, Terry Fallis, who himself is a two-time winner of the Leacock and the author of 8 national best-selling novels, including his latest, Operation Angus. And for those of you who read Best Laid Plans, Operation Angus is a must read because it's a few years down the line and it's delightful and funny too. Best Laid Plans was the winner of the Leacock Medal for Humor in 2008 and in 2011 won CBC's Canada Reads. It's been adapted as a 6-part CBC television miniseries and a stage musical. The High Road was a Leacock Medal finalist in 2011. Up and Down was the winner of the 2013 Ontario Library Association Evergreen Award and was also a finalist for the Leacock Medal. His 2014 novel, No Relation, won the 2015 Leacock Medal. His 5th, Poles Apart, published in 2015, was a Globe and Mail bestseller and a finalist for the Leacock Medal. One Brother Shy, Albatross, and now Operation Angus have all been on the Globe and Mail's bestseller list. In 2013, the Canadian Booksellers Association named Terry Fallis the winner of that year's Libris Award as Author of the Year. Okay, Terry, without any further ado, I put this entire event in your capable hands.
Mark, thanks so much. So happy to be here. Thank you for those kind words. I'm sorry you had to read that long list of books there. Sorry about that. Anyway, delighted to be here. I am really happy because I really enjoyed this book. It was so much fun, and I'm so pleased to be here tonight with Richard and all of you to celebrate the launch of The Troupers. I should just remind everyone online that there will be a chance for questions later on in the event. And so please pop your questions, as I think Alex mentioned already, in the Q box, and we'll come back to them later in the program. Richard and I are going to talk for about 3.5 hours, and then we'll go to questions. Okay, no, we won't. I had lots of questions though, so we're going to go for about 25 minutes, and then we'll go to questions. So let me formally introduce our guest of honor. Richard Scarsbrook is the author of 10 books, including the novels, The Troupers, The Indifference League, the National Post bestseller Rocket versus Gravity, and The Monkey Face Chronicles, which won the 2011 Ontario Library Association White Pine Award. His short stories and poems have also appeared in The Guardian, the Los Angeles Times, Descant, Existaire, Prairie Fire, and New West Review, among many others. His first produced screenplay, Royal Blood, was an official selection at many international film festivals and won Best Short Film at the TIFF Associated Milton Film Festival. He has served as writer-in-residence for the Toronto District School Board and the Orangeville, Richmond Hill, and the Toronto Public Libraries. He also teaches creative writing at George Brown College and the Humber School of Writers. He is one busy writer. What his bio doesn't say is that Richard also has lurking in his past experience on the stage and a real love for the theater, which you probably already knew if you've read The Troupers. Richard, welcome and congrats on the book. I so enjoyed it. I know those tuning in are going to be loving it when they get their hands on it from Queen Books.
Thanks, Terry. That really means a lot to me. I'm really, really glad that you enjoyed it, and I really appreciate the excellent blurb you wrote for the cover.
My pleasure. It was heartfelt and intended all the way through. It was just a great read. So why don't we get started? So this may be sort of a predictable way to start, but it's possible that not everyone joining us this evening will know much about The Troupers. So just as kind of a scene setter of sorts for our conversation, and without giving too much away, maybe just tell us a bit about who the Troupers are and give us the briefest sense of what the novel is about, and then we'll go into some more detail.
Sure. So with no spoilers, basically The Troupers is about a a group of quintuplet children who are born into a multi-generation entertainment family. And their former child star turned stage director father is desperate to turn them into the Dion quintuplets of the stage, mostly for his own glory.
Right.
That was
Yeah,
about as concise as I could be.
That's great. That's a great elevator pitch. We've only gone 3 floors. That's excellent. Well done. So look, I'm a member in good standing of the Write What You Know school of writing, however unfashionable that may have become. But I have a feeling that you also may plumb the depths of your own experiences. And while not writing autobiography, I sense that your ability to write with such conviction, authority, and authenticity is at least partially because you're writing about worlds that you know about and that you love, that you care about. If I'm right, help us connect the dots between your own life and the world of the Troupers.
That's a great question. And there are a few elements of this story. It's funny, a couple of people that know me pretty well who have read the book said, wow, it's my 10th book. And this is the one that people have been saying, yeah, you seem to have been born to write this particular book. And there's a few reasons for that, I guess. One is there's nearly 100 classic film references sprinkled throughout the book because the quintuplets' father won't permit them to go to public school, homeschools them, won't permit them to watch any film made after the golden age of Hollywood. So he's really trying to groom them into these little stage acting automatons. And the classic film references, I was asked this in another interview the other night and they seemed surprised, but every movie that I mention in the book, I've seen. And part of that comes from my background as a small child. My parents, every Saturday was the entertainment for the evening began with the question from my father, what's on Elwee? And my dad and mom and my sister will all laugh when they hear me say that, because if you don't know who Elwee Oast is, he was the host of TV Ontario's program Magic Shadows, and then later Saturday Night at the Movies. And of Elwee Oast, it was said he never saw a movie that he didn't like. So as a result, he was a fantastic interviewer, and he would interview people associated with classic films that almost never gave interviews otherwise. So as a result, as a small kid, I watched a lot of classic films that a lot of people of my generation would not have seen. Then when I got together with my partner, Danielle, Danielle's a social worker, and when she was paying her dues at the beginning of her career, she did a lot of shift work at shelters and couldn't sleep the rest of the time. So she stayed up watching TCM, Turner Classic Movies, late into the night when they really showed the deep cut stuff. So between my parents and between my own film interests and between these pretty deep cut films that Danielle has a profound knowledge about, the inflow of classic films into my life has been very rich. Do you mind if I go on the second element? Because you're getting
I think you need to.
Okay. The second aspect I think that really informs the book a lot from past experience is I do have some background as a stage actor. I was involved. I lived in the southwestern Ontario town of Petrolia for about a decade and taught there, and I was involved with the theater group there. And if you don't know this, Petrolia, Ontario has a fantastic little theater called Victoria Hall. And as the result of a fire, the inside burned and the town raised an unbelievable amount of money and restored it. It's one of the greatest small theaters in the province. And I was lucky enough to get to act there with the Petrolia Community Theater. So in the book, the details of the backstage, the theater itself is totally fictional. I wanted it to have a certain over-the-top exterior look, but the interior and the backstage, to me, when I was writing the book, look exactly like the backstage and green room and behind the curtains at Victoria Hall. And it's fun. I bet some of my friends in Petrolia, when they read the book, they'll say, oh yeah, everything from the stage back is is that. So between those two things, that informed the setting and the background for the story for sure.
Well, it really comes through in the novel, and it sounds like very little research was required for that. You just plucked that out of your own memory banks and made it real for the reader.
Yeah, I still had to go rewatch a lot of films, and again, without any spoilers, but because you've read it, there are a few films that are pretty key to the development of the plot, and I went and rewatched all of those. In some cases, one particular one, which Terry will know which one I mean, one I rewatched many times to get a certain funny scene right.
Right. Well, that's hardly research, Richard. That's just entertainment, getting to watch all those movies again. No, that's great. Let's talk a bit about the quintuplets. As an identical twin myself, people have spent nearly half of my 61 years confusing me for my brother or my brother for me. You've written a novel starring a set of quintuplets, yet you succeeded in making them all different. I was never confused. They each have their own quirks and issues that really makes this family saga, quite compelling. Talk a little bit about the challenge of creating 5 distinctive siblings who all happen to have been born on the same day and live and work together in the family business. You must have put a lot of thought into their personalities.
Yeah, that's always true in my work, I think. For me, character always comes first, and I build the story from once I've got a good idea of who the characters are. Just an interesting side note, 3 of the interviews I've done in the last 3 days, 2 of the people either are identical twins or have identical twins, which is kind of just a funny aside. But I chose the quintuplets because to make the characters quintuplets instead of just 5 siblings, partly I guess the academic reason is I'm really interested in the nature versus nurture debate. And I thought I've explored this before in an earlier book where it was a pair of non-identical twins where one has an apparent disability and the other doesn't, and it causes them to be nurtured in a completely different way. So I thought it would be really fun to have 5 kids who are the same age, and early in their lives, they start exhibiting almost stereotypical stage character differences, which their director father then exploits. He trains them and funnels them into these archetypical roles so they can basically play versions of themselves on stage over and over and over again, which I thought the fun part would be, it begs the question, well, where does the direction from the father end and where do the actual children begin? And I thought that would be fuel for a good story, as at what point will each kid rebel and decide to become themselves instead of this role that their fathers push them into?
Yeah, exactly. Well, they were all very special in their own special ways. So that was a great sort of ensemble cast to have. And cast is the right word, obviously. But maybe we should have started with John Lionel Trooper. He is like, what a character, larger than life, perhaps even picaresque in some ways. Where did his name come from? Where did you come up with the name? Because that's an important name.
John Lionel Trooper. So the Barrymore family, the first family of Golden Age Hollywood films. That basically John Barrymore and Lionel Barrymore, brothers. The father's favorite classic film, he has a poster of it in his trophy-filled office, is Grand Hotel. So that's one of the films that actually plays a pretty big role in things that happen in the story. And so as his kickline mother, who was once in the Follies in New York, when she has John Lionel, she decides instantly he's destined for greatness and names him after the 2 Barrymores. That's kind of where it all begins, right? Do you want me to talk more about that particular character?
We are going to do that, but I wanted you to get that story out about the name, because, and even the name Trooper, like a troop of actors almost. I mean, it was just I just loved the name.
Yeah, and that there's a little side story about that with the grandmother character, where she flees her abusive vaudevillian parents in London and jumps on a ship and comes to New York. And when she has to she makes up a name for herself, and she says, "Well, Trooper sounds like the last name of an actress." So she even that character, who does become important later in the story, the grandmother character has invented herself as a character rather than playing who she is as soon as she steps off the ship, which all of the characters in the book do that to some extent.
Yeah, exactly. It is a great name, and I don't know if the non-writers in the crowd appreciate it, but choosing the names are actually quite important to writers, and they make a difference. So I love that connection with the Barrymores. So beyond that Barrymore connection, how did you create him? Were you modeling him after somebody, or is he a composite of some larger than life Hollywood types?
Yeah, I would say he's a composite of some of the true or not true stories about some golden age Hollywood stars off screen, and to some extent just the stage personality in general. I wanted him to be. I mean, he starts life as a child actor and eventually becomes a serious stage actor and then the director of his own children. And I wanted him to also be a character much like his mother, who is born into playing a role, you know?
Right. Yeah, exactly. I've always thought that comic novels, they tend to need a larger than life and often flawed, maybe deeply flawed characters. Was that part of your plan, to use Lionel as the primary source of humor? Not to mention the sadness and the crises that occur, because he's so outlandish. An outlandish character is a gift for a comic novelist.
Oh, definitely. And I would maybe argue that an outlandish character is often key to a good dramatic novel too.
Absolutely.
At least for the kind of books that I like to read. If it's just, a bunch of nice people sitting around sipping tea and talking about their problems, I find that neither funny nor dramatic. So you always need your characters to be lifelike, but a little bit more, or a lot more.
Right. Yeah, and never crossing the line to sort of, so they're so large that they defy belief. It needs to be in that zone. So I thought John Lionel was just a terrific character. But speaking of that humor, you may not know, Richard, but John Irving is my mentor. It's okay, John Irving doesn't know that either, but I think of him as my mentor because I've loved his novels so much, and I've learned a lot from reading them. And one of the things I learned is the power of juxtaposing humor and pathos, and sometimes rubbing them right up against one another, so that the sadness is more compelling, the humor is more meaningful. And I thought you did that with great skill in The Troupers. It is a very funny story, but it is laced with some sadness, some melancholy and strife and crises. Can you share your approach to tackling a book that makes us laugh, but sometimes sort of puts a lump in our throat a few pages later? Like, there are plenty of funny scenes and lines in the novel, but there's also some sadness. So I'd love to know if that was a conscious decision, or were you just following the story?
I'd say it's all that aspect of my own writing has only become conscious to me very recently. And in fact, a couple of recent interviews I've done about this book, I've started realizing that's been an element in almost every story I've ever written. And I think that's because whether I'm setting out to write a dramatic story, a serious one, a funny one, or a blend of all of the above, I want any story I write to, no matter how outlandish or how different from real life, I want it to be lifelike. And real life, I mean, in real life, as human beings, humor is one of our greatest defense mechanisms. And sometimes we defend ourselves from difficulty or embarrassment or what have you by laughing immediately at what happens. Sometimes we defend ourselves that way only after enough time has passed that we can see the humor in a situation. And sometimes there are certain things that happen that we can never laugh about. So when I'm setting out to write a funny story, I still like to counterbalance the laugh out loud moments with a bit of, okay, and here's something we're not going to laugh about because life sometimes hands us those kind of things too.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, very few of us have lived lives that have strictly been laughter. I mean,
Yeah,
it's not what life is
wall-to-wall
about.
fun.
Yeah. So anyway, so I really like that about the novel. It's not just above the line funny all the way through, though it is quite funny in a sustained way. But we dip below the line, and that makes the story more real and more powerful and more relatable to our readers, because we're all human beings living complicated lives. So
Exactly.
kudos to you on that.
Well, thanks.
I've got a couple more questions. We're winding down. I want to make sure we get to the questions from the audience, but I couldn't pass up the opportunity to ask you about the setting, Niagara Falls. I thought choosing Niagara Falls was inspired. It's a very unusual family where all is not what it seems at first glance. And it struck me that Niagara Falls is kind of like that too. There's this veneer, this artifice about the city. So I'm assuming that was intentional. Tell us about your thinking behind choosing Niagara Falls as the setting.
Well, for that particular part of the story, I'll give some credit where credit is due. A few early readers of one of the first versions of the manuscript I created, initially I had set the book in the fictional small town where I've set most of my other stories, in this fictional town called Fairville, and I'd had the characters working out of a theater much like the Victoria Hall in Petrolia. And through conversations I had with a couple of early readers, it came up that maybe them being in an entertainment town might sell the story better. And then Niagara Falls seemed perfect, not only because he's trying to have this fairly serious theater in the middle of the carnival atmosphere that is downtown Niagara Falls, but then also right up the road is the Shaw Festival, which is a real serious standing in the foyer and sipping wine and talking about serious plays kind of place, which is really where John Lionel Trooper would rather be directing and performing. So as soon as it landed on Niagara Falls, it was like, bye Fairville, we're going to set the story in Niagara Falls instead. And it made a big difference.
Yeah, I thought it was a great choice. And it didn't really occur to me until, well, it probably wouldn't until you are into the novel and you're like, wow, he's chosen Niagara Falls. It's perfect. It's a perfect location. So very thoughtfully done. I just have one more question. We've got just a couple of minutes left for our conversation, but I'm almost certain there are some writers in the crowd of the legions of people who are watching us tonight, Richard, some aspiring writers and maybe some accomplished writers. So I thought we should just talk briefly about your writing process, where you locate yourself on that spectrum from the no plan, just listen to my muse, pantser, as in the popular writing vernacular, and at the other end, the anally retentive, incredibly detailed outliner where I reside. What is your writing process?
Well, I'm glad you asked about this because I know you and I have talked about this at writing conferences before. And so like Terry said, Terry is really on one end of the spectrum where I've seen your plans when you put them out, like where you write out every detail of what's going to happen. It winds up taking up, what, about a quarter of what the writing will actually be? You're
Yeah, about that, 80 or 90 pages. Yeah,
yeah.
that's
So
right.
I mean, Terry, who is enormously successful, so maybe wannabe writers should listen to him, plans out pretty much everything that's going to happen in the story before he writes it. I would argue that the planning stage is a big part of the actual writing. Then on the other end of the spectrum, there are other very well authors that I've also spoken to that they basically just make up a decent character, throw them into a sticky situation, and then spend a few hundred pages trying to figure out how the hell they're going to get back out of it again. And
Right.
both for all different kinds of writers, either end of that spectrum can work. I'm somewhere in between, and the better I get at this, I think I am a little closer to Terry's end of the spectrum, but I'm somewhere in the middle. I like to know my characters really, really well before I embark on an adventure with them. I like to know what's getting this train rolling, what's the general direction it's heading, and where's the final station? How do I want this to all pay off at the end? But I also kind of enjoy discovering the small details as I create the story and discovering things about the characters as I go. Now I have the pluses and minuses to that too. The pluses in this story are a couple of the quintuplet characters became way more important to the story and way better characters as a result of giving them room to grow as I develop the story. In particular, when you read the book, you'll see the character of Marigold, who's pretty key to the whole story. Marigold grew and became a really beautiful, detailed character as the story progressed. She became something much more than I thought she was at the beginning of the story. So that's an advantage to sort of having a general path, but finding your way there. The disadvantage, and I'll say this is one that hasn't happened too many times that happened with this book. I wrote an entire subplot. This isn't a spoiler because we deleted it. There was an entire subplot about Errol, the narrator and the only boy, about this girlfriend he finds, who then kind of pushes her way into the group, and the sisters aren't very happy about it, and which kind of took over the ending. And Barry at Cormorant wisely said, yeah, I think you need to just, her plot line needs to drop altogether. And as soon as somebody said so, I went, oh, of course. But that's sometimes the problem of figuring it out as you go, is sometimes you need to delete things that don't belong, which Terry never has to do.
Well, no, I think you've made a good point there. I think there are so many different ways to write. I once went to hear Richard Wright speak, who wrote Clara Callan, the first Giller Prize winner. And he said, I couldn't get my ass in the chair each morning if I knew where the story was going. It was that sense of discovery for him that kept him coming back. So I think the real challenge for writers is, I think we all have to figure out how we write best. And you've found your way. I think I may have found my way, but it's sometimes a journey to figure out how we write best. And it's worth experimenting if you're miserable when you're writing. I know you're not, but in others. So anyway, so look, that was really interesting. Thanks for that, Richard. Why don't we? I'm going to just jump over to the questions now. I've got the Q&A box open. So we've got a few questions here and a few minutes left. I'm just making sure this is actually a question. Here's one from Emily. Have you considered writing from the perspective of any of the sisters? Why is it just Errol?
That's a great question, and there is a specific reason for that. Errol is he's the last born. So as there's a scene in the book where as the kids are being born, John Lionel's eyes are getting wider and wider, and he's like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, I can have an all-female troop of quintuplets that I can, and then the boy pops out and he's like, oh no. So Errol is the most disconnected from his father. He is the least impressed by him, and Errol is the one that his father is least impressed by. So Errol is the logical narrator. The daughters, there's one, Joan, who's named after Joan Crawford, and she's a born actress. She is the #1 daughter. And then the next 3 daughters are less interested and less skilled at acting, but they're all troopers. But Errol's not. He is the odd man out, so to speak. So he was the logical sibling
Yes.
to be the primary narrator in the story.
Yeah, the perfect observer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Nicholas Ruddock has written, he says, "Hi, Richard, great to hear about the Troupers. I haven't yet read it, but will do. But have you read Dickens' Nicholas Nickleby, featuring a provincial acting troupe with a charismatic but overbearing parental-like director? Very funny book. Sounds like there may be some parallels there. Have you read
Maybe. I
Nicholas?
guess the next book I'll be reading will be that one. I read a lot of Dickens in high school and university, but not that one. So I guess when I'm at Queen Books on Saturday, I know what I'll be picking up for my next read.
There you go. Here's a question from Barry Jowett. The casting director for Troupers, the motion picture, has called in sick. You've been asked to cast the leads for the film. Who are you going to pick?
Oh, wow. Yeah, it depends from any era. Let's see, for Errol, we want kind of a meek everyman kind of character. I'll tell you what I'd be looking for in the cast rather than actually picking particular actors, I think. Let's see, for Joan, she needs to be big, dramatic, over the top, like Joan Crawford. And okay, see, the thing is, so I should tell you a little bit about how the parents have named the characters. The mother wanted to name all of the girls after flowers, and the father wanted to name all of the children after classic actors. And they flipped a coin, and he got to name 3, and mom got to name 2. And Joan is named after Joan Crawford, and I think that's who she resembles.
Right.
Olivia is named after Olivia de Havilland, and she's kind of the solid, sensible, money in the bank, will live to be 100 and be kind of cool and level-headed. And then Errol, his dad, hopefully names him after Errol Flynn, thinking he'll be this swashbuckling stage babe magnet, for lack of a better description. And he turns out to be exactly the opposite of his name, and which I think feeds into him being the perfect narrator. And then Marigold, who I've mentioned, and who am I forgetting? Oh, and Violet.
Yes.
So the 2 that are named after flowers. Well, Violet turns out to be rather punk rock and a little on the violent side. So that's pick any actress who could wear those boots, so to speak. And then Marigold, who I said became for me the character I discovered the most along the way. I'm not going to tell you too much about Marigold. Other than she seems soft and demure and passive, and is not.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Okay, good. That was I love that exercise. That was good. That was very helpful. So one final question from our audience, from an anonymous attendee. How has writing the Troupers and your other adult titles differed from your YA books? You've also written poetry and screenplays. What draws you to all these genres rather than sticking to just adult fiction or just YA? Well, that's a very good question.
That is a really good question. I'll try to make it brief because that's a really multi-tentacled question. Well, one thing, I guess, I like doing different kinds of writing. I've been getting into screenwriting as well, but poetry, humor writing, more serious literary fiction. I think the more different kinds of writing you try your hand at, the better you become at all of them. And ultimately what you choose to do for your next project is better for having all of those skills. But the difference between my YA writing and my adult writing, I would probably argue there's not as much as you would think. I think my YA books, which is really where I mostly started, I think they became popular because I didn't really write them to be YA books. I wrote them to be good stories featuring young characters. And then when I decided to make the switch into writing more for adults, I tried to write good books with adult characters.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's impressive that you can span all of those genres. That's a real writer at work there. Well, this has been great. I've really enjoyed having a chat about the book, and I did so enjoy the book. If I haven't made that clear already, I encourage everybody to head out, hopefully through Queen Books, where you can get a signed copy, already signed, or I think Rich is going to be there in the next few days, and there'll be a chance for you to actually talk to him. So the link for Queen Books, Chantel kindly put it in the chat function already. I think it's earlier in the meeting, but she'll probably do it again. So please feel free to check there. And thanks everyone for joining us for this. I really enjoyed it, and so good to hear your story behind the novel, Richard. So let me throw it back to Richard. I know you've got some closing words.
Yeah, so basically, I just wanted to give some very sincere thanks to everyone who helped make the book happen and make this evening happen. First, thanks to Terry. I have a big long list of Terry's accomplishments, but you've heard them already. Terry is a rock star. If you are so kind to go to a bookstore in the next few days and pick up a copy of the Troupers, I would recommend also grabbing a copy of Operation Angus, Terry's latest. I finished it a few days ago and loved it. I've read most of Terry's books, and this one's one of my favorites. We'll have to have a cross conversation about this later. Also, thanks to Alex Snyder at the fabulous Queen Books. And Chantel has just posted how to get books and where to meet me at Queen Books. So there it is. Thanks, Alex. I can't wait to sign at the store on Saturday. And thanks for hosting. And then my thanks to everyone at Cormorant Books, publisher and fearless leader, Marc Côté, managing director and lightning bolt of positive energy, Sarah Cooper, editor extraordinaire, Barry Jowett, whose wise and thoughtful guidance really helped the Troupers become the book it was meant to be, sales and marketing superstar, Chantel Cho, and editorial assistant and master of everything, Sarah Jenkins, Sarah Jensen. I'm getting sleepy now. And finally, to all of my friends, families, fellow authors, readers who tuned in tonight, everyone who's read one of my books before or is planning on reading one sometime soon, thank you very much. I'm very grateful. None of this can happen without any of you.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Congratulations again, Richard. And thank you, Terry. That was a really interesting conversation. And I know that there's going to be a lot of people looking for books because it sounds fantastic. Thank you to Mark and everyone at Cormorant. Thank you to Chantel for putting this together. And yeah, we're looking forward to seeing you, Richard, on Saturday at the store. So it's at 914 Queen Street East in Leslieville. Yeah, thank you and congratulations again.
What, Alex?
Thanks, guys.